Hi, today marks the 29th anniversary of the transitioning of the Phyllis Linda Hyman, and I wanted to spend a little time today remembering her. I also want to read to you the epilogue from the book Strength of a Woman, the Phyllis Hyman Story, written by Jason A. Michael, who was a journalist for Essence magazine. He said when he initially tried to pitch the book, some of the bigger publishing houses said that there was no real, not enough interest in Phyllis Hyman to support writing her biography. And rather than just give up, he self-published it. And I so appreciate that he did that. He did a wonderful job self-publishing the Phyllis Hyman story. And I want to read to you today from the epilogue of his book. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that the first time I heard of Phyllis Hyman, I was a high school junior, and we had a talent show, and a girl from my class got up and she sang Somewhere in My Lifetime. And I just thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And that's how I became acquainted with Phyllis Hyman. But she was a remarkable talent. And she did a stint on Broadway and was nominated for a Tony Award. And I looked at her performance in Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Ladies on Broadway. And it is incredible. It really is. And she didn't win the Tony Award, however. The award went to an actress by the name of Marilyn Cooper for the musical Woman of the Year. And Marilyn Cooper was in one scene of that musical. And I wanted to see her performance to compare for myself her performance with Phyllis Hyman's, just to see what the Tony Awards gods were thinking. And I'll link both of those performances in the description, and you can see for yourself. That's all I'll say about that. But anyway, she really was just an incredible talent, but there's so much about her outside of her public persona. And there are so many things that people say about her or think that they know about her that when you read the biography, you find that no, those things aren't true. And Jason A. Michael was able to garner information from the people who were closest to her, her family, those in her professional circle, those at her school, at her college. And again, I think he really, really did a fantastic job, although I think he could have chosen a better photo of her for the cover. But overall, he just really, really did a remarkable job telling us who Phyllis Hyman was from the people who knew her best. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to read for you the epilogue of his book, and I hope you will take interest in it and maybe explore further the life of Phyllis Hyman, and hopefully we can get newer generations to find interest in her work. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll come back at the end of the reading to just do a quick wrap up. Thanks. Epilogue to Jason A. Michael's The Strength of a Woman, the Phyllis Hyman Story. God is spirit. Music is spiritual, so every time you hear Phyllis sing, she lives. Roberta Flack. The show that night at the Apollo did go on, but not everyone stayed for it. Many fans learned of Phyllis's death only after reaching the Apollo, where local news crews waited to interview Phyllis's fans. Some gave their tickets away, others requested and received a refund. Those who stayed received special condolences at the start of the evening from Marshall Jones, the Apollo's general manager and host for the evening, radio personality Sergio Dean from WBLS. In tribute to Phyllis, her band, drummer Paul Mills, saxophonist David Lee Jones, vocalist Eric Jones, musical director and bassist Ron Richardson, and keyboardist Alex Shantzes went on as scheduled. David Lee Jones performed his saxophone solo with tears in his eyes, and Eric received a standing ovation for his version of Old Friend, which he reworked to pay homage to Phyllis. When Eric wasn't singing, a spotlight illuminated a single microphone positioned at center stage.
If you focused hard enough, you could almost see her, and if you listened hard enough, you could almost hear her unmistakably distinctive voice filling the atmosphere, wrote one local columnist of the performance. Those who stayed for the tribute enjoyed an unforgettable performance for a lady that will never be forgotten. The next morning, Glenda released an official statement to the press. The family and management of Phyllis Hyman wished to express their deepest sorrow at the loss of their loved one. It read, Phyllis took her life on Friday afternoon, June 30th, just prior to a scheduled appearance at the Apollo Theater in New York. We should all take Phyllis's death as a moment to reflect on our own individual lives and commit to reaching out to our loved ones, our communities, and to the rest of the world. Phyllis's tragic death is a wake-up call for everyone in pain to know that there is no need to be alone in your pain and that you should get help. Personally, Glenda admitted that she wasn't surprised by Phyllis's decision to take her own life. Phyllis's philosophy about suicide was that it was an option. It was her feeling that she was in charge of her life, it was her body, and therefore it was her death. Elaborating in another interview, Glenda discussed Phyllis's final days. Phyllis was uncovering the riddles in her life, she said. She was in touch with her emotions. Sometimes when you start that process, the demons that you confront may have more for you than you might have thought you would find. When Blues Bar came so abruptly to an end in October, Phyllis, physically incapacitated, was suddenly forced to confront those demons, particularly her addictions and their consequences, face to face. She saw how devastating being vulnerable could be to her, Glenda said. I think when she looked at everything that her issues represented, how for all intents and purposes they blew an opportunity out of the water, how it rendered her literally out of work for months, how she was exposed, vulnerable. It scared her to death. With so much time on her hands, Phyllis's overactive mind was left to wander through the minefield of suicidal thoughts, and like so many others who suffered from bipolar disorder, she didn't make it out alive. Her healing journey was not only difficult, ultimately it was fatal, said Glenda. Per her instructions, Phyllis was cremated following an autopsy which would ultimately reveal that she had died of an intentional overdose of pentobarbital and secobarbital. Meanwhile, the first of several organized memorial services was in its planning stage. It took place at St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Manhattan at 7 p.m. on Thursday, July 6th, the day that would have been Phyllis's 46th birthday. Like all her shows in the city throughout the years, the memorial brought out quite a few celebrities, including Roberta Flack, who told the crowd, God is spirit, music is spiritual, so every time you hear Phyllis sing, she lives. Others also spoke, including Kenny Gamble, Phyllis's designer Cassandra McShepard, Eric Jones representing Phyllis's band, personal assistants Leo Lord and Lanice Molina, Phyllis's ex-girlfriend Martha David, Brenda Berry, Emma Ward, and an assortment of other friends and family. Phyllis's ex-husband Larry Alexander showed up and asked to speak, but organizers of the memorial, including Bill Schultz, who acted as the afternoon's MC, had decided that no one would be added to their already long list of approved speakers. Of all those that did speak, none was more eloquent than Glenda. Phyllis was many things to me, Glenda said softly. She was a friend. She was a client, obviously. She was a sister. But the thing that she was probably the most was my teacher. Phyllis had convictions that were stronger than anything. If she believed in something, whether she got herself into trouble for it or not, she stuck by her truth. That gave me courage because I had to represent those convictions. I had to tell everyone how she felt, do damage control for it if it happened. Just manage it all the way through. I had to have patience with people who didn't understand her convictions. I had to learn patience. Patience is really important when you represent someone like Phyllis Hyman. I had to have non-judgment. I couldn't judge anything that she believed in. I couldn't question her conviction. I just had to accept it, and non-judgment is a real blessing in this life if you can learn that lesson. But most of all, as my teacher, Phyllis taught me the beautiful gift of unconditional love. If you really and truly learn the lesson of unconditional love, you have received all that there is to receive. Several members of the Hyman family spoke as well. Jeannie told stories of growing up with Phyllis. Anita read a poem written by a former teacher of Phyllis's. Michael told the story of a memorial service for singer-songwriter Dan Hartman, I Can Dream About You, that he'd attended with his sister the year before. It was a cheerful memorial, and she looked over at me, and she looked me straight in the eye, and she said, "This is the way that I want to be remembered. I know family and friends are going to be very sad, but I want this to be cheerful because I want my life to be celebrated, and I want to be remembered for who I was." Let's not think about the bad things. She made a choice. A lot of people might not agree with that choice, but it was her choice, and the important thing is that she is at peace. Sakina was unsympathetic in her remarks. "I've been going through a whole bunch of feelings," she said. "Initially, I was angry. I wanted to go down to the morgue, pick her up and slide her 1 or 2 or 3 times and say, 'How dare you stop struggling?' And I've got to get up every morning and struggle to put one foot in front of the other. How dare you stop forcing yourself to breathe? How dare you?" "I was envious for the first time," Sakina continued. "I've never been envious. I've always been proud. I loved my sister. I tried all I could do to help her. But see, my Lord got a plan, and his plan ain't always what my plan is. There's a saying in Islam that says, 'All praises to the God for all circumstances.' So in this, there's a lesson. That lesson is to take your own personal little space, to take a look at your own personal little space, not your mama's, not your brother's, not your sister's, but take a look at your own self. Because usually, if you're feeling somebody else, or if you're telling somebody else about their stuff, you probably need to tell it to yourself." The last of the Hyman sisters to speak was Anne, and she thanked Phyllis's extended family for the comfort they offered. "She had a big family," said Anne. "She had her birth family, which only some of us are here, but she had family that she picked and picked her, all over the world. And all over the world she was somebody's sister, somebody's auntie, somebody's mother, somebody's daughter. There are a lot of people who can honestly claim Phyllis Hyman in their family, and there are many people that she claimed as family as well. And I honor that because I think that helped sustain her as long as she was able to be sustained." Anne said Phyllis had a love of people. Phyllis was very much in love with and concerned about our community and what is happening in our community, and she hurt over what we are doing to each other. She internalized that pain. She carried it like a 1,200-pound weight. And when she said, I'm tired," she meant it. Following the service, and per Phyllis's written instruction, there was a party held at the Birdland Supper Club at Broadway and 105th Street, titled A Farewell Toast and Celebration of Life. It was her last New York gig. Phyllis's ashes were then transported to Pittsburgh, where a second memorial took place on Friday, July 7th, at the Pittsburgh Memorial Covenant Church. The largest of the memorials, held in Pennsylvania, however, took place the following week as friends and family gathered in Philadelphia's Bright Hope Baptist Church on July 11th. Hundreds lined the streets, unable to squeeze into the capacity-filled church. Throughout these services, and as the news of her untimely death continued to spread across the country and indeed the world, many would ask why Phyllis had taken her life, and an equal number would offer theories. "If anything she died of, it was probably lonesomeness," said Mercer Ellington to the New York Daily News. In spite of all her bragging, she was fighting down this inferiority complex. In her interview with Jet Magazine, Jeannie Hyman stressed to the reporter that it wasn't over a man or lack of one, that her sister chose to end it all. "Honey, listen, check this out. Phyllis Hyman would never have taken her own life over no man. There were a lot of things that troubled Phyllis. Sure, any woman wants the companionship of a good man, but that's not the kind of stuff that had Phyllis all bent out of shape. Please dispel that myth." Along the better notions was this one by Phyllis's longtime publicist, Sheila Eldridge. "I don't think it was any one thing that led to this. It was a gradual deterioration of her spirit and self-esteem that led her to take her life." Journalist David Nathan, another longtime Phyllis acquaintance, reached a similar conclusion and summed it up as eloquently as anyone. "It was the culmination of years of self-doubt, insecurity, and so little self-love, he wrote in a personal online tribute. The lack of self-love, Glenda said, was key. The mythology about Phyllis is that she never felt that anyone loved her, Glenda said. That is so far from the truth, it's unbelievable. Phyllis knew people loved her, but she didn't love herself. 2 days after her death, Patti LaBelle dedicated her show at the Essence Music Festival in New Orleans to Phyllis, especially singling out the song Somebody Loves You Baby in her honor. In September, Nathan Connors and Michael Henderson performed a series of concerts called A Tribute to Phyllis Hyman. One thing I've been realizing, Connor said at the time, is that I knew she was loved, but I'm starting to realize just how much. People loved Phyllis Hyman. Pharoah Sanders and others would also go on to do such tribute shows, and Jean Carn, a regular headliner at these events, would permanently incorporate a selection of Phyllis songs into her stage repertoire to continuously eulogize her friend. If by the fall, media coverage of her death had started to lull, the stories picked up again as the November 7th release of her third album for Philadelphia International neared. 5 of the 9 Nick Martinelli-produced tracks made it onto the 10-track album, including the title song, which was one of 5 in total co-written by Phyllis. The remainder of the album was composed of 2 tracks produced by Kenny Gamble, one by Dexter Wansel, one by Dave Jam Hall, and one by Phyllis's former piano player, Barry J. Eastman. One glaring omission was Strength of a Woman. Phyllis had hoped that the album would bear that name, and instead it failed to even include the song. Released to favorable reviews, I Refuse to Be Lonely sold a couple 100,000 copies within weeks. But though the album peaked as high as number 12 on the Billboard's top R&B hip-hop albums chart, it soon disappeared. The album's first single, I Refuse to Be Lonely, climbed only to number 59. A video was created for the song by compiling still shots and video footage of Phyllis throughout the years. But for the most part, Zoo had no clue what to do with the record. It's hard to have a typical record marketing plan, said Miles Baker, Zoo's National Director of Sales and Marketing. We don't have a tour. We don't have an artist. And it's a sticky sort of situation. You don't want to seem like you're trying to capitalize on her just passing away. For many, the album was just too sad to listen to. Ironically, what was supposed to have been Phyllis's declaration of determination took on new meaning in light of her death. Songs such as One Good Reason to Stay and I Refuse to Be Lonely were no longer looked upon as shows of strength, but rather as swan songs. To many, it looked like the lady who'd made a career out of singing about herself and her ongoing battles of the heart had given her fans a personal goodbye note. Though most true fans felt obligated to buy it, few could bring themselves to listen to the album more than once. Calling I Refuse Phyllis's most personal album, reviewer Ray-Mark Rinaldi of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch poignantly explained the dilemma faced by many of Phyllis's fans. It shows a woman facing crises and searching for peace. She was more involved in the writing than ever before, and it comes through in her delivery. If she were alive today, that might be a pleasant turn for many of her fans. The way things turned out, it's hard to feel pleasant about this work. The album's second single, I'm Truly Yours, barely charted, reaching number 94. I Refuse, however, didn't remain the only new Phyllis product on store shelves for long. They were suddenly flooded by greatest hits packages from her various labels and others as everyone attempted to capitalize on her passing. In 1996, Jean Carn, Norman Connors, and the Starship Orchestra, and newcomer Nathan Heathman, Jean Carn's musical director and one-time band member of Phyllis's, played a week of shows at Blues Alley they called We Remember Phyllis. Jean also stepped up in May of that year when Phyllis was honored with a star on the Philadelphia Walk of Fame. In a star-studded ceremony, Phyllis was honored alongside Will Smith and Boyz II Men. Jean performed a medley of Phyllis's songs and presented the award to Phyllis's father, Philip. By this time, another tribute of sorts was in the works. The Whispers, who went on at the Apollo the night Phyllis died, conceived a stage play they called Thank God the Beat Goes On. A fictionalized and somewhat inaccurate account of the last day of her life, it was scorched by critics who called it a showbiz biography of the Whispers with a flabby script. Allison Williams played Phyllis, her costumes a poor imitation of the stunning Cassandra McShepard originals Phyllis had worn. Today, Phyllis continues to earn critical acclaim and retains the admiration of many. When I think of all the talents that I've known over the years, I consider Sarah Vaughan and Phyllis Hyman as having the greatest voices, greatest instruments ever, said Nancy Wilson. The compliment would have thrilled Phyllis, as she considered Wilson the greatest voice of all time. More than a decade after her death, Norman Connors, Gene Carn, and others still continue to participate in Phyllis Hyman tribute shows. New Phyllis material continues to be released. During her life, Phyllis released a total of 8 albums. Since her passing, and as of this writing, more than 15 Phyllis Hyman albums have been released, including 2 reissues, 2 albums of new material, and a dozen compilations and/or greatest hits packages. Despite this, her estate still remains in debt. Commercially, Phyllis has fared no better in death than she did in life. Her body of recorded works is not comparable in size to most of the legendary ladies of song, and tragically, her name is not instantly recognizable to today's generation of record buyers. But to those in the know, those lucky enough to have heard or seen her, there will always and forever be only one Phyllis Hyman. There's nobody ever who's going to be like her, said Patti LaBelle. There's no voice in the world like hers. There's no spirit like hers. When she left, like with Luther, you just don't get any more. Phyllis Hyman was a superstar, just waiting to shine.
So that was Jason A. Michael's Strength of a Woman, the Phyllis Hyman Story epilogue. And I wanted to come back to say thank you for listening and thank you for spending a little time with me today as we remember Phyllis Hyman on the 29th anniversary of her transition. It still makes me sad to read that book, to read the epilogue, to know what mental illness ultimately did to Phyllis Hyman. But she was a remarkable talent, and I hope that newer generations get to discover her and to just explore what a wonderful talent she was. So again, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. But also, if you're interested in the book, I really do recommend that you read it. It's a fascinating look into who Phyllis Hyman was outside of the stage, outside of her performance, outside of her public persona. And I think you'll learn a lot about her. But also, I hope you got a lot from the epilogue because I thought it itself was quite revealing. So in any event, thank you again for being with me today for this. Until next time.